Thanks for that, and can I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the nominees and finalists and winners in these wonderful awards from last night. I'm not Anne. Is Anne here? Would you like me to try and do your presentation? I can. But yeah, thank you very much for the honour of sharing with you the journey that MCCI has been on for the last 2 years. It does feel a little bit weird standing up in front of such an esteemed audience, and particularly hearing some of the amazing projects that were showcased last night and Olga's presentation this morning. We truly do stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us, and I'd like to acknowledge that. So just a little bit about MCCI before we kick off. We're a non-profit organisation. We were formed in those mid-70s when multicultural policies were first coming to the fore. We have a very big focus on advocacy and representation. We're a peak body that's made up of 75 members. About 2/3 of those are member organisations. We have about 110 staff and volunteers, and have services in aged care, disability youth, community capacity building, training and volunteering. And of course we are the New South Wales and ACT auspice for the PCAC program. The best place to live in Australia is Wollongong. We're about two hours south of Sydney, a population of nearly 300,000. Nearly 20% of our population is over the age of 65, and almost half of our population has a parent born overseas, which is consistent with national averages. We're a region that experienced very significant migration in the post-war period. People came mostly from Southern Europe to work in our big steelworks and manufacturing and textiles factories that we had. But the profile of our migrant community has been changing over the last 40 years or so in my lifetime. And so more recently we're seeing communities come from places like China and India and Pakistan, Thailand, and our humanitarian program is very much focused on Middle Eastern communities and increasingly the Burmese community. Just in terms of the kind of challenges as a called community service provider in aged care, they're the numbers that we're currently working with. And I'm sure that everybody's been and witnessed those presentations that demographers give about the challenges that are coming. Those numbers are set to double and triple within the next very foreseeable future. So for us, what are the issues that we're facing? The communities that first came to the Illawarra are in the main arrived here as skilled migrants. They had reasonably good English and quite a high level of social and economic capital. They formed really strong local community associations, but their needs are changing. They're now in their late 70s, 80s and older. Indeed, some of the first people that migrated to our region came in the mid-1930s at scale from the Ukraine, and there's very few of those folks left anymore. Their children have now grown up and moved away, and our services have had to change. We once provided quite an active social support group for the Ukrainian community that now is no longer a makeup of our community. But of course, these are things that you all know. Individual needs are increasing, families and carers are under pressure. Small local organisations are really feeling the pinch of all of this reform work. It's forcing organisations to have to make huge investments in things like client management systems and so on. And those truly local, trusted community organisations are feeling the pressure. So what's going on for MCCI? Well, I arrived in the joint never having worked in the aged care sector before just under 2 years ago. My only experience with the aged care sector was having to support an elderly grandparent through the system, and I have to tell you I found it pretty hard to do that as an educated person with very high levels of social and economic capital and a lawyer to boot. So we started having a look at our organisation, and I think we knew that the idea of us continuing to work in the way that we were, given all of the community's needs and the changing system, that business as usual was going to be a dead end for us. But we saw the opportunities that were available, And so this idea of change started to be talked about quite actively. Of course, our people reacted to the idea of change in that spread of emotions that you see there. You had people who liked it, loved it, kind of laughed it off, were sad about having to think and work in a different way because they were, wanted to hold on to the way that they were working. And of course, some people were angry about it. When you looked at the challenge that the organisation had, and I'm going to get to the good stuff in terms of the client work and some photos and stuff later, but our biggest challenge was to really have a deep and hard look at the governance of the organisation, the foundation that allowed us to do the good community work that our people do. So when on the left there, you can see, 35 odd services, 500 clients, 100 staff and volunteers, been around for 40 odd years. What was really important for us to do, and it was great to hear Olga's comments around engaging with directors and CEOs and boards. We really had to engage our board to get them to understand what the changes that were coming in the sector were going to mean for the organisation. We had to spend time looking at strategy. I do talk about our organisation as a business. Although we are a community-based organisation, we do need to think about how we modernise the way that we work, and whilst still remaining true to our purpose and our values, thinking and working in a more business-like way. The stuff around financing, it's the stuff that really drags people down. It's the thing that most de-energises me about the aged care system, trying to make all of this stuff work within impossible unit costs that exist in all of our service contracts with government and in the home care package system. But fundamentally, putting that financing work and taking your people along that journey to understand that if we don't operate in an efficient way, we won't be able to do the good work that we do. Obviously, the policy and procedure stuff that people talked about, getting that all right, and a serious challenge for all organisations is that workforce planning stuff. The average age of an aged care worker in the sector now is, I think, in the early 50s. It's a workforce that issue about workforce planning does need some work. So I won't bore you by going through all the strategic direction stuff. I do want to point out one in particular. One of the things that I see in the non-profit sector is that organisations in this competitive world are starting to pull the shutters down and starting to think in a very insular, inward sort of way. We were very deliberate in wanting to point out to the whole world that collaboration and partnership is at the centre of who we are. Looking at those numbers for the Illawarra, for example, of 12,000 people today, our little organisation is never going to be able to support 12,000 people over the age of 65. So we need to build those alliances and partnerships with others to do that. The other really key and fundamental thing just about the strategic directions was being very clear about supporting our staff and volunteers. And that leads to this view that I have as a leader in the organisation, that your people are everything. I'm not the person that's out there delivering services to our clients. I won't use the word consumers, but to our people. I'm not the person delivering those services. So making sure that and taking our people with us on this journey has been really important. That whole piece that you have to do around consulting and engaging your staff team, developing a learning and quality improvement culture, recognising the work that people do, and it's just the little stuff that you have to do well, pointing out to somebody that the way that they have been supporting Mr. or Mrs. in their work is completely consistent with the way that we want them to work, and we sometimes take that for granted. The stuff that we've done just at a service level, okay, I'll wrap up, is really just about clarifying, again, coming back to that values and purpose stuff. Why do we do what we do and how? We've widened the spread of services that we have offered in response to the community's need. We hadn't been a home care package provider until recently. And all of that kind of foundational work has allowed us to do some really cool stuff, which I'll try and get to now before I get booed off the stage. I won't go through the kind of branding stuff, but we look very different today than what we did a couple of years ago. So let's just quickly go through some of the good stuff. Somebody mentioned earlier around reaching new and emerging communities. The photos at the top there are the Burmese community in Wollongong. We found about 35 or 40 odd people from the Burmese community. We're not really quite sure how old they are because their papers through the immigration process are not entirely accurate because they don't have birth certificates and they don't know the date that they were born. So that has been a challenge getting through the My Aged Care process, but thankfully our local My Aged Care staff have been really helpful with that. We hadn't really done a lot of work with men in the past. A lot of the services that we had been providing were focused on women. So when a local men's shed got in a little bit of trouble, we decided to just help them out. It was a challenge to get the My Aged Care process and our contract manager to understand that a men's shed does fit the idea of a social support group. So there's been a bit of kind of two-way education about that. We spend a lot of time talking to communities about the services. So we've heard a lot this morning about the need to educate communities and to bring people on this reform aged care journey. So we're setting up a reference group. We run social media campaigns with images of real people. So pretty much all the stuff that you're seeing in our photos and branding and things are people that are within our service. It's a very authentic look and feel about how we do, and we find through some research that we did with the University of Wollongong last year that that's what people connect with. Translating a brochure from English to Turkish or Vietnamese is not enough. People will connect with images and words and phrases that are meaningful to them. The problem that I have as CEO is that it's very, very costly to do that and to invest the time and energy in it, but it will pay off. Again, that's just a set of really nice images about the sort of work that we do, spreading the work from entry-level aged care, social support type services into more of the home care, higher needs stuff. And particularly, these are just some photos of my team who do amazing work. We spend time as a team together. We go away and we spend a day, we just find the resources to spend a day together thinking and talking quite deeply about how we want to work and the sorts of things that we want to do. And the bottom ones are the work that we do with the sector, particularly through the PCAC stuff. So there's some photos from our recent PCAC conference where we were talking about the workforce. So in summary, for us, we've been about, I guess, building the foundations to be able to respond and anticipate and also work within the changing environment. Fundamentally, it's about teamwork, better communication, stronger systems, finding the new stuff, having the courage to close services if you need to because they're no longer viable, and supporting people through that change. It's been a year of change for our whole organisation, from the board right through our management team to our frontline staff. But ultimately, it's a year that we hope will set us up for some sustainability and growth to meet the community's needs that we know are there and are not being met. Thank you.